Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm going to give a few seconds for everyone to come in. It takes a moment for Zoom to allow everyone into the webinar. I'm going to give everybody a few seconds before we begin. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tom Hunter Pratt. I'm the Multimedia Specialist for the Institute of Child Nutrition. Today, everyone is in listen-only mode. And at the end of today's webinar, you're going to be receiving a pop-up link that's going to ask you to complete our survey. Your feedback is valuable to us, so we ask that you go ahead and click on that and complete the survey that you get. You're also going to get follow-up emails within 24 hours of the end of the webinar. And in those emails, you'll see that same survey just in case you miss it. You're going to have a recording link to view the recording if you'd like to do that. And you'll also receive a certificate within 24 hours of the end of the webinar. You'll get that through email, so be on the lookout for that. At the end of each panelist presentation, there's going to be a Q&A session, so please be sure to find that Q&A button on your Zoom control panel and enter any questions that you have, and we'll get to those questions as best we can if time permits, and we'll answer those at the end of each panelist presentation. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Janae.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the School Nutrition Star webinar on highlighting success stories and supply chain disruptions. And this is part 2 of this series. I'm Janae Owens, an education and training specialist with the Institute of Child Nutrition, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Just to reiterate some things that Tom Hunter has shared for the new people coming in, during today's webinar, all attendees are muted. There will be time for questions following each speaker's presentation. And if you have a question, please type it into the question box on your screen. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but due to possible time constraints, every question may not get answered during the webinar. Individuals who have registered for the webinar will receive an email at the conclusion of the webinar, and the email will contain the recording link and a link to the evaluation survey. Please complete this evaluation survey as ICN appreciates your feedback. ICN will send out the certificates and the recording link within 24 hours. ICN collaborates with USDA to host these monthly School Nutrition Star webinars to provide attendees with the training, real-life strategies of program implementation, and best practices for use and action plans and/or goals. Training topics, free resources, and educational materials are also highlighted to assist school nutrition professionals with navigating through the enhanced responsibilities of school nutrition operations. The Institute has created a website for all of these materials and resources specifically related to the webinars, and you can find this information at theicn.org/star. The topic covered in today's webinar fall under the key area operations and administration and meet the USDA Professional Standards Code 2000 and 3000. Joining us on today's panel, we have Lisa Jenkins. She is the Director of Child Nutrition for the Frisco Independent School District. This is her 6th year with the district. For 8 years, she was the Director of Child Nutrition for the Fayetteville School District. For 6 years after that, she worked for a K-12 software company. She has a bachelor's degree in nutritional sciences and business administration. She is a member of the School Nutrition Association, Texas Association of School Nutrition, and Texas Association of School Business Officials. She served as the state president of Arkansas School Nutrition Association through 2007 to 2009. She has been married 21 years to Chad Jenkins, and they have 2 German Shepherds, Bronco and Eli. They live in Plano, Texas, and like to ride mountain bikes in their spare time. Also joining us from the Frisco Independent School District is Catherine Smith. She is the Sorry about that. Catherine is the school nutrition specialist and certified Serve Safe instructor and proctor with more than 20 years of experience. Catherine has a background in school nutrition with experience working for a food service management company, seasonal kitchen operations, procurement, USDA foods and further processing, and warehouse management. As coordinator of procurement and nutrition, she has had the opportunity to learn to adjust to rapid change as the district has grown 430% annually since the early 1990s. Catherine shares school nutrition knowledge and operational expertise with other industry professionals and district staff. She received her Bachelor of Science degree in Food Service Management at Sam Houston State University. She is also a member of the School Nutrition Association, Texas Association of School Nutrition, and Texas Association of School Business Officials. And last but not least, we also have joining us Dan Gorman, who is the Food Service Director of Montague Area Public Schools. Sorry, I may have butchered that. Dan has been a food service industry for 32 years, with the past 23 years in school food service. He is the co-chair of Muskegon County Creating Healthy School Meals, new product development chair of IFMA, which is the International Food Manufacturing Association, and the K-12 Council. He is a previous nutrition chair of legislative chair and area rep of School Nutrition Association of Michigan. He is also the recipient of the 2021 USDA Farm to School Implementation Grant. Thank you all so much for joining us on this webinar. Thank you so much to the panelists. And then for our learning objective for this webinar, attendees will recall successful strategies on how to address supply chain disruptions within operations. And so now I will turn the presentation over to Lisa and Catherine.
Good afternoon. So I'm Lisa Jenkins, and like Janae said, Catherine Smith and I are in the Frisco ISD school district that's located in Frisco, Texas. The enrollment in our district, we're close to 66,000 students, and this district has been a very rapidly growing district ever since the beginning. From 1999 to 2010, I believe it was, over those 12 years, every single year, they opened between 2 and 6 schools a year, which I find amazing. We have a free and reduced percentage of 13%, which might sound low, but that still is around 9,000 students that qualify for free and reduced price meals. We have 71 schools, and we also have a district warehouse that includes a freezer storage, refrigerated storage, and a dry storage. So this kind of leads me into our first polling question, which is, does your district have a warehouse or other storage facility for child nutrition? If so, do you have both freezer and dry storage, freezer only, dry storage only, or no warehouse or other storage available? The reason I'm asking this question is because we found that having these facilities were very crucial in making it through this pandemic the last 2 years. Having the inventory on hand to pull from when needed was crucial, as opposed to depending strictly on vendors for products. So that's why we're asking this question. And the storage, whether it's on-site or off-site, you know, either one, having additional storage, we felt was very beneficial. So once we get the results, I'll read you the results of the poll. All right, so 45% of you have freezer and dry storage available. There's about 5% that have freezer only, 3% dry storage only, and 46% of you have no warehouse or other storage available. So that's interesting. So we thought it would be beneficial to kind of give an overview and talk about our average daily participation to kind of see, to truly understand how we got to where we are. So February 2020, we're rolling along in a regular school year. We serve around 27,000 meals, close to 28,000 meals. We had honestly more a la carte sales before pre-pandemic due to our higher paid population. So then come March 2020, we all know what happened at that point in time. We were off for spring break, ironically enough, that week that all of this started to play out. Once we left for spring break, we never came back. So we were, the students immediately after spring break went to a virtual environment. From what I understand, our district had already been planning for virtual learning if something like this were to happen. So we were able to immediately pivot and transition over to a virtual environment. And as you can see, the drastic decrease in our meals that were served daily. So these are daily, average daily participation numbers. So that number dropped 90% within a couple of months. So we had in our warehouse, we had enough inventory on hand to continue serving 28,000 meals a day. And we dropped down to 2,900 meals a day. So our warehouse stayed pretty packed, solid from that point on. So moving forward from the end of the 1920 school year, once we started the 20 school year, we as a district, we started the first 3 weeks were strictly virtual. Then after that, all of the students were given the option whether they went face-to-face or they remained virtual. So we had about 50% of the students that chose face-to-face, 50% virtual, fluctuated a little bit, percentage here and there throughout the school year. But as you can see, our participation did start to increase. In September of 2020, we were still on the National School Lunch Program, and we were offered the seamless summer option, although there were some stipulations that took a while for us to work through in order to get approved to serve the seamless summer option, which we started October 1. So you can see in October how those numbers jumped from the meals that were being served free. And once again, that was only to half of our population. In April of 2021 of this same school year, we had increased up to 28,000 meals per day. So we did increase significantly that year because of the seamless summer meals that were being served. So going into the 21-22 school year, as everybody knows, we didn't know what they were going to do. Were they going to continue with free meals? We weren't sure what the district was going to do in regards to a virtual option. Were they going to offer a virtual option? Were they not? And our district ended up offering a virtual option to K-6 students. And that was ended up being about 9,000 students that chose to remain virtual because there wasn't a vaccine available for them, was the rationale in our district in order to offer that virtual option. So beginning the school year, we were around 32,000 meals. And at the end of the prior school year, we were around 28,000. So we had a little bit of an increase with more students coming back face-to-face. And as the word got out that meals were free, even though we continued to put out communication, they've steadily continued to increase over the year. Now, currently, we have all of our students back face-to-face. There's no longer a virtual option, although with this surge in the COVID cases, we're kind of leveling off, decreasing a little bit in our meal participation, although we do foresee that number will start to increase once this surge in cases starts to decline as well. So I'm sure manufacturers out there would have really liked to have had this information ahead of time if we would have known. This is looking at a crystal ball, right? It's like you can see how those participation, dropped and then just kind of going along the way how it's increased back up. And if you look from February 2020 to October 21, we've increased 50% of our participation from a normal year. So that was a little unexpected. We did project that we would increase, but not quite that much. So if you're looking at this, and if you kind of get into the shoes of a manufacturer, you can kind of see how they've struggled with keeping up with, what we're doing across the nation in regards to participation. So that brings me to the next polling question. How has your average daily participation been affected by the pandemic? Has it increased, decreased? Was it not affected by the pandemic, which I kind of doubt anybody's was not affected? Or was it constantly changing like ours? As you can see, going from a normal participation and then plummeting down. That's when we were doing our curbside meals. Everybody was virtual, and we did curbside meals. And we got pretty good at curbside meals. I'm sure everybody else did as well. But we weren't sad when the curbside meals ended, though, either. We, had fun while we did it. But now that they're done, I haven't heard anybody complain. So once the polling is done, I'll share the responses with you. All right, here come the answers. So 28% increased as the average participation affected by the pandemic. So 28% increased, 26% decreased, about 5% weren't affected at all by the pandemic. That's interesting. And 41% was constantly changing. So those are interesting responses. So some of you had an increase in participation as a result of the pandemic. So that's very, very interesting. So one more question, one more polling question. What percent of students are currently attending in person? Less than 25%, 25% to 50%, 51 to 75, or 76 to 100%. Just the other day, we were on a webinar call with the Texas Department of Agriculture. During the whole pandemic, we were doing weekly calls with them for a while to help them guide us and what we need to do, where we're going, et cetera. And then they've moved them to monthly meetings. This last meeting that we had, they had a similar polling question. And I believe the percentage was 95% of schools in Texas are back 100% face-to-face. There are some districts, I don't know if other states have closed down their district, but there's a district close by Frisco that shut down this week, Wednesday through Friday, because their COVID cases continued to increase and they didn't have the subs to replace them. So they were, is there any way you can pop back up the results again? Thank you. So the results of this poll, there's about 3% of you that have less than 25% of your students face-to-face. There's 4% that have between 25 and 50%. And then 19% of you have 51 to 75%. 74% of you have between 75% and 100. So that's kind of what I was anticipating. All right, so next I'm going to pass it over to Catherine Smith, who is our coordinator of nutrition and procurement. Catherine.
Thank you, Lisa. So if we think back to the slide that Lisa shared previously, we did leave for spring break and we never returned that school year. And so not knowing how long the quarantine would last, we went ahead and accepted orders that we already had out there for direct delivery to our district. And so when we started the 2021 school year, we kind of joked about it because what are we going to do to reduce our inventory? We're going to sell it to our customers. So that was just a running joke that our dietitians and everyone in our office had during that time with the supply chain. Although our participation slowly increased during the 2020-2021 school year, we didn't place nearly the number of orders with our vendors as we would have previously. Next slide. So nobody really knew how we would return to school in August and September of 2020, which was the beginning of this previous school year. It was literally the last minute when we got any information, even from our district, because nobody really wanted to have to make that decision. Would it be in person? Would it be virtual? They didn't want to be responsible for anyone becoming ill with the virus. And so, manufacturers would call and they would, ask what we needed from them. But we did find out last minute, September, your students are going to be partially virtual and some are going to return in person. However, the ones that are in person, we want everything pre-packaged and served to the students to avoid any kind of contact. And so that right off the bat last school year, we did find that we had an increasing need for disposables in all of our schools. And so we worked with several of our vendors to find out what they had available and what we would be able to get. And we received quotes on those so that we could purchase items into our warehouse to have readily available. You shift forward to February of this last school year, and in Texas, we began planning our USDA foods and further processing for the following year. And so think about it right now. Do you know how you're going to return to school? Do you know if you're going to have an SSO waiver for next school year? Well, we don't, and we didn't know these things this previous year either. And so how would our students be returning for the school year, and would we have this waiver? Because when we looked at our information from percentage wise, what we fed of curbside meals or what we had fed of in person that year, we did see increases, but we didn't know what would happen if we would also have to go back to the National School Lunch Program. So move forward to April and May of last year, and we do start seeing that there are some changes in the supply chain. You start hearing of manufacturers who are beginning to announce product suspensions. So we really were taking a look back from our forecast, what we diverted for processing for this school year, and what items are we really going to have on our menu? Is there anything that we can streamline? We'll probably still remain short on staff for the current year or for the next school year. So what can we modify to make it work all the way around? And then by May, lead times were increasing. A normal lead time for a direct delivery in the past was 2 to 3 weeks. Some of our vendors at this point, due to the demand of their product, they have as long as 12-week lead times. So we had to figure out how we could start purchasing our food with our new budget in May. And so we worked with our procurement department in order to get purchase orders approved for the next budget year, which technically did not begin until July, just so we could meet lead times. And so that brings us to our polling question. How close was your forecasting for the current school year? Was your forecast spot on? Was your forecast too high? Was it too low? Or was it not even close? I know we've found ours is kind of all over the board because of product suspensions and because of just the multiple delays in production for different items.
So Catherine, what are some things that you did in order to project for this coming school year?
So in order to project for the year we're in right now, we looked at our pre-pandemic average daily participation, and we really tried to utilize that. And then knowing that we would have some sort of an increase just for enrollment and based on our meals from the previous year, we did add a little bit in there, but our projection was nowhere near what we're actually feeding right now. So most people, 12% say that their forecast was spot on, 25% say they forecasted too high, 29% was too low, and 35% was not even close. So it is it's difficult to forecast not knowing the future and having that crystal ball. So then you come to July, right before this school year just began. And at this point, there are still no decisions on how students are going to return or if there's going to be the summer seamless option renewed for free meals. So we were streamlining our offerings, looking at our cycle menu, and we started playing all of these what if scenarios. What if everybody returned? What would our average daily participation do? What if it's the National School Lunch Program? Because we have so many more students who are paid, parents may still be struggling and they may decide to send a lunch. So we had to play a lot of what if scenarios and go with just our best guess of what our administration was going to decide. Which brings us to the start of this school year, August of 21, and multiple manufacturers are sending notices of price increases and product suspensions. And we realized that staff is not returning to the workforce as we had predicted. So we had to make some additional decisions. This is when we opted to decrease the number of menu offerings. So we went from 3, we'll say in some cases, 3 entrees down to 2. Or we decided also to decrease the number of weeks in our menu cycle. And this was to aid in the training as we brought new employees on because they would see the menu more frequently. In September, we started seeing that our meals were surging. We were not ordering the quantity of food that we needed to have on hand at that time. And so we had to kind of play catch up a little bit right immediately when the school year started. So we worked with our vendors. There were a few times we had to rely on our super supplier and say, hey, what do you have on hand that can help us backfill until we get our direct delivery? And we just continue to implement different purchasing methods to allow for product availability. We find with some of our manufacturers, we have to order large quantities less often. And with some of the other ones, we are making more frequent purchases in order to keep up with everything. And even now, we continue to expect that our participation will increase this spring once we get past this current Omicron variant of COVID. So we really don't know where we're going to peak with our meal service, but we are hoping that we will be able to keep up with it. And moving into next year, we will plan to increase our forecast. So just our strategies, communication, stay in constant contact with your broker sales representatives, your co-op coordinators, all of your vendors, know what's going on with the COVID variants in your location and the number of cases, because it'll kind of help you predict, what might take place. With your forecast, again, that goes back to communication. Each time that our school district made a change in how students would return, or we had additional students selecting to come back face-to-face, we communicated that with them. We didn't know exact percentages of who would participate in the quantity, but just that information alone does give them some idea of what's about to happen. Really know what USDA foods you have on hand and for further processing. Our commodity bulletins in Texas do allow for us to know what future deliveries are being made of our brown box items into the warehouse that delivers them to us. And so we can utilize that along with knowing what we have diverted for processing in order to plan a menu. Make changes to your menu if you need to. And going back to communication, which I think is the key to all of it, communicate with all your stakeholders, your principals, your parents, your staff, because there's a lot that's going on right now. And sometimes just letting them know what's going on and seeing part of your world will help them to understand. Take advantages of different purchases and waivers that are available to you. Emergency purchases we've had to make within our district just to be able to keep product available for our schools to order. We've had to take advantage of meal pattern waivers from time to time because even our vendors don't have enough drivers to make deliveries on the regular scheduled day. And I honestly do not know how we would have made it where we are today with having product on hand without our district warehouse. That's our biggest tool and strategy, is to be able to have space for what we need on hand. Which brings us to, I think, our final polling question. What will you base your forecast for the school year 2022 to 2023? Will you use pre-pandemic usage from 2019-20, your current usage? Will you increase from your current usage, decrease from your current usage, or you're not sure? As I said previously, because we've seen such great increases, we are probably going to be increasing for our forecast based on what we're seeing currently, and knowing that SNA is looking to hopefully get the SSO waivers continued for another school year.
Yeah, I know some of the questions that had come up were in regards to this.
All right, so what will you base your forecast on? 9% say they'll use their pre-pandemic usage from 2019-20. 27% say they'll use their current usage. 27% say they'll increase their current usage. 3% say they'll decrease it, and 34% are not sure. And, you know, that is the most frequent question that any of our vendor reps have asked when they've called to check in throughout all of this is, what are you planning to do? Because, you know, they can't produce if they don't know what we are going to do. So as much as we're able to. And Lisa had shared this quote with me after she returned from a principal meeting earlier this week. And life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain. And this storm will pass eventually, but right now we're just learning how to dance in the rain and make the most of our situation. So are there any questions that anyone has? Well, actually, we'll get to those.
One of the questions that we have is, what tools have you used to communicate these inconsistencies affecting menus? Thankfully, we never ran out of food, but staff and parents have not been very understanding of some of these circumstances that have been out of our control. And I would say most districts have probably were faced with the same thing. Catherine has been excellent on staying on top of the communication, and hers is either just picking up the phone and calling the vendor directly, or the broker, manufacturer, or sending emails. You know, if an email doesn't get responded to and, you know, she needed an answer, she would just pick up the phone and call them. She's got a very good relationship with all of the vendors, which I think is very important. And, you know, they're, you know, the ones to reach out to us first too and say, hey, you know, what's it looking like? And she would let them know, hey, starting in January, all of our kids are going to be back face to face. We don't know what that means, but we anticipate an increase in participation. So all along the way, everything that we knew, she would communicate to the vendors as soon as she could, whether it was something that was going to happen for sure, or it's like, hey, this is on the horizon, this is what we're looking at doing. And then as soon as, you know, she knew that it was going to go into place, she would share that information with them.
Yeah, and we've worked consistently with our communications department in order to probably in August and September, right as school was starting, we started noticing participation is starting to increase, and we didn't have staff like we had in the past. So I know Lisa worked with communications, and there was some information emailed to our principal staff to share with the staff at each campus in regards to that, because supply chain issues are not just affecting us in schools, they're everywhere. You know, people see it on the news about restaurants and grocery stores, but it's happening in our schools too. And so we wanted to stay on top of that. We've had communication classes at some of our high schools even ask for interviews. So that was one aspect for communication.
Yeah, and one of the other questions on here, and I don't know if Catherine has any more to say in regards to this, but does anyone on here know what next school year looks like? We have forecasting challenges to deal with for next year, which I'm sure everybody is in the same boat. But I'll let Catherine give a little bit more information on, what she feels next year is going to look like and what information she has.
Sure. I don't think anyone absolutely knows for sure what next school year holds. And I do believe it's going to be different in every district. It's going to depend on your staffing. It's going to depend on who all your vendor serves, and as well as, your amount of staff and participation. I mean, if you've read anything in the news, they don't expect recovery in the supply chain till at least they say fourth quarter, which would take us into next fall. But I mean, I honestly don't know what's going to happen next. Just trying to keep things where they need to be and coming into our district. So
one of the questions here also says, how well did you communicate with parents about menu changes? I think Catherine answered this, but on our website, our communication department was really good with working with us and asking us what we need to communicate to the parents so they could put it on our website. Obviously, not every parent looks at the website or reads it, but we did what we could in order to either do a mass email out to the parents, put it on the website, however we could communicate it to them. Our district was very helpful in working with us to get that information out to the parents. It looks like a lot of people are having issues with forecasting for next year, just not knowing if meals are going to be free. It does say here that California is going to do universal feeding, keeping everyone free next year.
there's one school that has stated on here that they've decreased their menu offerings to one, and they changed their menu based as food comes in, which is very smart. I know our dietitians have worked really closely with our warehouse. One thing that they look at is the expiration dates on the products, and they do try to place those more predominantly into the menu so that they're utilized before they expire. You know, we're not without supply chain shortages, just like any other district. We've just been able to do our best to continue getting the product as we need it. But if there are, we'll continue to answer questions via the chat through the question and answers, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you at this time, Dan, so that you can get started on your part of the presentation.
That is awesome. Thank you. I will get started. And you know, the first thing I wanted to point out, I know my profile picture and what I'm wearing is the same. So I'm sure everyone's asking, what's with that? Is this my favorite fancy outfit? Or two, do I own just one shirt blue shirts and jackets? We are going to leave that up for a mystery for the rest of this presentation, but I just wanted you to all wrestle with that as we go through. I want to welcome you all here. It's great to have you. As I said, I'm from Montague Area Public Schools. We are a small school district in Western Michigan on the lakeshore of Lake Michigan. We have about 1,300 students. We do about 1,000 meals a day, 650 breakfasts. We do around 1,800 CACFP and dinners and snacks, which we hand out remotely to families. So we're doing it still using the waivers to do that. You know, I did want to point out that we have a strong farm to school program with school gardens. We interact with our FFA program a lot to get things done. And also in prior years, and I'll reference this a little bit, I ran our neighboring district in Whitehall for 10 years. And that ended this year. We're doing some things where I want to have more of a county reach. And I thought one district was really going to be more appropriate for that. And one thing that, might be good to know, if you cut your job in half, it becomes a little easier. So I did want to share that with you. Since the pandemic started, it's really been pretty normal for us. No big deal, pretty simple. From the pandemic through to this year, just really normal, kind of dull stuff. Well, actually, there might have been some challenges along the way. When the pandemic hit, we went into doing emergency meals for our families, like a lot of other districts did. As a smaller district, we really found that we could reach most of our families. We had about 50% of our families every week picking up meals. And so we did that from March through the summer. And what we found is our revenue from touching all those families was double and sometimes triple of what it had been during our normal operations. And then when we went into the 2019 or the 2020-21 school year, we were hybrid all year. So we had one district that was Monday through Thursday serving no breakfast. We had another district that was on an A-B schedule. So we'd get half the kids on one day and half the kids on the other day. And because of that, we still kept doing remote passing out of meals. And the revenue was very good with that. So we were doubling our revenue during that time. And so when I share this about, how we went into this year, so as we came into this year, there were a couple things that were going on. One, money wasn't a problem. So if we had challenges with higher food costs or those type of things, we had the finances in our fund balance to get by. The other thing that really happened from the pandemic to the start of this year is we really built some flexibility and some resilience. Switching over from feeding face-to-face to handing meals to someone in a car really trained myself and my staff to really do things differently and have some flexibility. And I think that really paid off as we moved into this year. Now, I do want to tell a best year ever story. So my superintendent's been here for about 7 years, and every year he's had a little crisis. Well, not a little crisis, a lot of times big crisis. There's been a big thing every year. And as we were coming into May, and it seemed like the pandemic was ending, and it was going to be a little bit better, I went to him and I said, you know what? Next year's your year. It's going to be the best year ever. And so I told him that. And I kept kind of saying that every once in a while. And even in July, when we started the new school year, I got a cake and it said best year ever. But as we got to the end of July and started going into August, it's like, things are still going to be rough. But I was still all in. I said, you know what? If we have the right attitude and we're being flexible and really just jumping into it, can just still be the best year ever. And then so we go into this year and we've had the struggles we have. And I talked to him about a month ago and I said, I don't think it's the best year ever. And he goes, Dan, I think it's the worst. And I'm like, yeah. So this is not the best year ever. We can do a lot of things. We're really flexible but we're hitting our mission. We're taking care of kids. And so that's something, that I'm proud of for myself and my staff. When we came into this year, the previous year, what we did, we were on hybrid and we were feeding kids, but we really reduced it because our goal was to get kids through a service line without it ever being a line. So we went K-12. There were only 2 options that we offered. We really weren't doing offer versus serve because they would get, their fruit, milk, and veg would be the same for everyone because we didn't want kids stopping and thinking. And so that was kind of the model that we used to get us through the 2021 year. And so when we came into this next year, we said, you know what, we're going to open it up a little bit, but we're not necessarily going back to normal. We simplified our menu. We probably have less choices. We're doing less scratch cooking and less choices of fruits and vegetables. And then when we got into the school year, we don't have a centralized warehouse. We have a prime distributor that we work with. And then a couple side suppliers that we work with. And so when we got into the fall and we started ordering food and those kind of things, it became a real challenge, and it was like a treasure hunt. You would go and you would go to the items that you wanted to get, and then they were out. Then you would go back and you would say, oh, maybe I can try this and this. And then those items were out. And so you would really go back and forth and try to find those things. And it was really double and triple the time to do your weekly orders, to try to find the things that would fit. Sometimes you could find something that was somewhat close. Other times you'd have to change menus and communicate that through. So what we looked at doing is we said, you know what, how can we improve on this? Where can we take steps to kind of lessen the pain of doing this? And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next couple slides. You know, our first thing we did is we looked local. We said, you know, what do we have in our environment that can help, you know, take a piece of that supply chain and say, this is solid. You know, the first thing we looked at, we were having some issues with hamburger buns and hamburgers. And so we have a butcher who's in our area, and he could handle the volume that we were looking for. And so we had some conversations with him. And so he brings us once a week, he delivers us our hamburgers. They're a raw product, they're 3 ounces, very nice quality. It's a little bit of a challenge to cooking from raw, but we kind of overcame that. The next thing is we had some supply chain issues with our tortilla chips. And down the road from us, there is a manufacturer that makes a really high-end tortilla chip and sells it in our grocery stores. And so we went to them, and we knew we didn't want their fancy printed bag, you know, that had 1.5 pounds of chips in it. We needed something that more fit our needs, but we also needed it to be a win for them. A lot of times when you're working with a supplier, they might do something to be nice, but they can't do that for very long. So we really had to say, how can we make that a fit, you know, for our supplier? And so what we did is we ended up purchasing bins. We line the bins, and they have a tight fitting lid on them. And then a couple weeks or a couple days before we need our chips, we load them up in our delivery truck and we take them to their warehouse. And then they will go through, and the only step they have to do is they take the lid off, they fill it with chips, and they put the lid back on. So it's simple and easy for them. And we pick them up in that afternoon. And so far that's been a really, it's been a really nice plus for us, because it's a better chip than we were serving before. You know, the other local things that we've always had is we've always had a local baker that we've been using. And Michigan has great apples, and we've been working with an apple orchard for a number of years, and just very excited that we keep such a high quality fresh fruit product with us. You know, the other thing that's been an advantage for us is, you know, our commodity consortium that we have in Michigan. Michigan has a number of consortiums. The one our school district belongs to is Great Lakes. And one of the things that's really helped with Great Lakes is they have single bank processed in brown box. And so what that means is, instead of me having dollars with like Schwann's or with JTM, and so I have pounds there, I have a checkbook with the consortium. And so if I want to get something from JTM, I order it, and then that checkbook goes down. If JTM's struggling and they can't get what I want, I might be able to go to Advance and get it. And so it really offered us that flexibility. As there were struggles from the manufacturer's side, I could still shift commodity dollars where I needed to do it. You know, and I think the other thing is we have a real strong DoD program. So what we haven't struggled with this year is fresh fruits and vegetables have been available all year to us. And so that's really been helpful. So our broadline distributor is Gordon Food Service. And as I said, when we started the year, it was that treasure hunt where you would go through and you would say, okay, I need a chicken patty. And so you order the chicken patty that you normally get, and it's out. And then you say, okay, how about this one? And that's out. And then you get really tired and you go through and you order the 12 chicken patties and you order 1 case of each. And then they all hit and you only need 5 cases of chicken patties. And so that was the world for about the first month. And what Gordon's does now is they will share with us every morning what their inventory is in their warehouse. And what they share are items that are more likely school items. So it isn't everything they have, but it's a lot of items that we use. And this has really made it a lot easier to go through and say, okay, what's available and what can I order? The other thing they have, so if they are out of stock of an item and they don't have any of it, you can see when the next delivery would get in. And so we've done that. Paper products has been real challenging. And so we've done that where we say, okay, when is this paper product coming in? And then you get ready and you order it, and then that works out pretty well. One of the things about this is they send this out at 5 in the morning. If I don't place my order till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a lot of those items might have been gone by then. And so that really is, that has really helped us out a lot. The final thing I kind of want to share, and I think the earlier group talked on, is just the communication piece. We did a lot of communication up the chain, the supply chain, so they knew about it. But really also communicating down that supply chain of the different people affected by it, really explaining what is going on. I even had some situations with my own staff in different buildings who would get upset because we didn't get what they were looking for, and to help them and give them the picture of the struggles it is to get the products that we're looking for, or even to get what we ended up having as a substitute. It's important to share that information. It's important that students are aware that we're not just changing menu items because we don't care or it was easier, but that it's a real problem, and it's a problem everywhere. And teachers are also your biggest advocates on a lot of these things. So sharing with teachers what the struggles are so they can talk to kids. I think that has really been the, some of the challenges that we've had in making sure that we're doing it, but it really has worked out well for us. So at this point, I am open for questions. And and I do want to say, one thing just about the differences of, Catherine and Lisa, what they do in their world is so different from what a small school district does. What they're doing, getting warehouse and really those big shipments and that kind of stuff is so different, from what we're doing. I think, some of the questions I see, I think we're going to have challenges with supplies for a really long time. I think, looking forward to finding, getting a sense from some of the manufacturers on, what are the solid products that they're going to have are a good way to do it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I know Catherine and I were talking about the supply chain, and if that's going to be a continued problem, we just don't see how it's going to turn around rapidly, right? So we feel there's going to be a continued issue with supplies as well as staffing. That was another question that came up, was the staffing. Are people going to want to start going back to work? We're really struggling with that.
And Dan, I know to your point, it is much different than in a smaller district. And that's why I say I'm thankful we have a warehouse. Our breakfast participation pre-pandemic, because our free and reduced is so low, it was virtually non-existent at some of our schools. We would have 8 students. Now you have 100, 200 or more at a school. So if anyone out there is struggling with items such as cereal and other breakfast items, these are reasons why. The manufacturers are stretched and they can't keep up. And just like Lisa was saying, one of our local school districts is closed for a few days because of staffing shortages. Those same issues are happening with all of our manufacturers.
So we had a question: what did you need to do to purchase your burger from a local butcher? For us, that falls under kind of the micro purchases. So there really wasn't a lot of different things that we had to have on hand. Obviously, it's a licensed, USDA facility. So from a food safety perspective, it's okay. So there weren't a lot of steps that we had to jump through from a procurement standpoint. And now someone's asking, what is your farms rate for your district? And I'm not sure what farms is. Lisa or Catherine, have you heard of that term before?
No, I was hoping you knew.
Then I would say it's awesome. Yeah, it could be 100 or maybe 150. I think a little bit with our menuing and those type of items that we're really looking at, trying to focus on items that we know, like a lot of our manufacturers are communicating with us that, hey, we're not doing these small side things. We're just going to narrow in and trying to also do that and look for different items like that. There's a question about how often do we get produce from our farms? We get weekly deliveries from, and mainly apples from the farmer that we work with. And the store-bought apples do not equal in taste and quality the stuff I get from my orchard. It just, even now, every day I love getting a Michigan apple. So it's just awesome. Let's see, this is a scroll thing. Yeah, I've never been they're talking about going to Costco or Sam's Club. That's got to be hard. Yeah, I mean, if you're in a spot where you're running out there, that is some tough hoeing, and that type of stuff. So, free and reduced meals. There you go. Free and reduced meals. We are at about 50% in our district. We just went CEP before the pandemic hit, which really helped from a paperwork perspective and all those kind of things. So I was really happy we did that. And I also want to give a shout out to our State Department. They did a great job through the pandemic, and they're continuing to do a great job to just offer us support. They are trying to help us and really to the mission of serving our community. And my hat's off to Diane Golzinski and her whole team, because they really were rock stars through the whole pandemic.
Yeah, our State Department, same. They did the weekly meetings with us to kind of keep us up to date, on what they were learning from meeting with USDA. So they were, key through this whole time. So we felt the support from them, which was very important as well.
We have a question about how do you get your local apples? And really, in general, the farm to school piece, it seems like it should be simple, but it's a struggle. And you have to have a lot of conversations, and you have to talk to people and find those connections. I know our connections, I found another district was using this orchard that was delivering, and I contacted them and asked if they would. And so those type of things of, kind of making those conversations, and even within your own school system of reaching out and saying, hey, does anyone know who your growers are in the area? If you're surrounded by orchards, that means the kids going to your school, their mom and dads are probably farmers, and that they can get those answers for you. So having those conversations and trying to figure out those pieces is always a positive. We were lucky enough, there's a question about appreciation for employees. We were lucky enough that our district allowed us to offer hazard pay to our employees over the pandemic part of it. And we haven't done anything yet this year. we're hoping when the contract negotiations come through that we can really adjust some of the salaries and those type of things. You know, a lot of the environment is really built by, you know, that appreciation, and money is a great way to show appreciation, but, you know, conversations and touching base with people. And, you know, my staff has been so great at, you know, we are doing pandemic feeding right now. We're handing foods out to families through our CACFP program. And we've been doing that, you know, since March of 2020, every week, you know, helping out our families. And there's probably only, you know, in that time since 2020, I think there's been 3 weeks that we haven't handed out food to our families. So, I mean, that's something that I'm really proud of. So there's a question about the auditors, and it sounds like the OD auditors have been accommodating, but she's talking to administrators who are saying they're having pressures. And I know, you know, like I said, our Michigan Department of Education has been great. They've been a true team member for us, and not a regulatory hammer at all. And there's a comment about notifying parents and being connected with parents. And I really, you know, that is, there's a lot of steps in communicating, and it's a challenge to make sure you're hitting all the steps and they don't get dropped sometime. Any other questions? All right, then I will end by saying that this is my favorite fancy outfit, but I'm gonna have to like rethink it for the next one. So Janae, it is back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. Your presentations were really awesome. Thank you for all the tips and strategies that you gave, and just being transparent with your experiences. So before I end the webinar, I just want to share one announcement. So there are still some openings for some upcoming virtual instructor-led trainings that we have. You can visit the ICN website for class descriptions and schedules for the February and March fields. And with that being said, I would like to close with a few final reminders that the webinar has been recorded and it can be viewed on the ICN website at theicn.org/STAR. The webinar certificates will go out in the next 24 hours, and please complete the evaluation survey that we have once the webinar concludes, because ICN appreciates your feedback. And again, to our panelists, thank you all so much. In closing, thank you to the attendees for joining us. Have a great day.